Believe it or not, the Jeep Gladiator has been out for 5 years. It was launched for the 2019 model year. For 2024, Jeep has given the Gladiator a small facelift, although you would be excused if you didn't realize it. The front end has been slightly updated, but the biggest change comes inside, where there's now a 12.3-inch infotainment system, as well as under the hood, where the diesel option is gone. Long live the Pentastar. Now, I think Jeep's decision to give the Gladiator only minor updates was a smart move. You see, basically the entire mid-size pickup truck segment, think Toyota Tacoma, Chevy Colorado, GMC Canyon, Nissan Frontier, has been updated since this car was first launched, many of them now featuring 4-cylinder turbocharged powertrains, but the Gladiator lives on with its naturally aspirated 3.6-liter V6, and I think that will help to attract buyers to this vehicle in 2024. But let's check out this car to see what it's like in 2024. Now, this is the Gladiator MOJAVE, which is one of 2 off-road oriented trim levels for the Jeep Gladiator. MOJAVE is the sand, high-speed, desert-oriented off-road trim level. Think of Ford Ranger Raptor. Even though that vehicle gets more power than a regular Ranger, that vehicle is tuned to go like Bajaing through the desert, high-speed desert runs. This vehicle is similar. It has Fox shocks, little bit of an adjusted suspension to take on high-speed off-road runs. The other off-road trim level is Rubicon, and that's more your trail-oriented off-road trim level. But as I mentioned, this is kind of the Gladiator we know and love. MOJAVE has already been out. They've had that for a couple years, and this is pretty much just like every other Gladiator. It is crazy long. The cabin isn't that big, but what midsize pickup truck has a big cabin? I would say this is comparable to the new Toyota Tacoma. In terms of passenger space, the back door has this weird cut because they didn't create a new door when they transitioned the Wrangler into Gladiator. It should be like this, but in a Gladiator, or in a Wrangler, excuse me, the wheel arch comes down like this, so that's why this door looks weird like that. I've always thought that looked weird on the Gladiator. But yeah, this is a great mid-size pickup truck, and obviously roof and doors, they come off. And on that note, this is obviously the hardtop Gladiator. I think this back roof section is definitely easier to get off than the Ford Bronco's roof section to get off if you get the hardtop Ford Bronco. There's just a lot less bolts you have to undo for this, although I find the doors slightly more difficult to take off on Gladiator / Wrangler than on Ford Bronco. So you win some, you lose some, but if you are going to get the hardtop Jeep Gladiator, know that it's not too difficult to remove the back hardtop section. It's more difficult if you're looking at something like a Bronco Raptor. Now, on the subject of Bronco, the Jeep Wrangler and Gladiator are often compared to Bronco, and that's because this vehicle, it's almost more comparable to a Bronco or to a Wrangler just because of the nature of this vehicle, how easy it is to remove the roof and doors. This is, you know, your off-road adventure-oriented vehicle. No matter what trim level you get of this car, it really is, that is what it is designed for before being a mid-size pickup truck. I don't know how many people genuinely crush off something like a Toyota Tacoma or a GMC Canyon to a Jeep Gladiator. I think it's going to be more of the lifestyle buyer who enjoys having a bed but doesn't necessarily need the utility or practicality of the bed or the towing. I think people who buy a Gladiator are because it looks cooler than a Wrangler or than a Bronco. And that sentiment is reflected in the payload and towing capacities for Jeep Gladiator. Max payload is going to be 1,200 pounds, right around there, and max towing is going to be 4,500 pounds. For reference, the new Tacoma can tow up to 6,500 pounds, so a ton more than this Gladiator. But like I said, the Gladiator is not a workman's truck. It's a car you buy for its character, like being able to remove the doors and roof, and for things like this. Instead of having a hood latch on the inside of the car, to open the hood, you have to unlatch these things on the side of the hood. That's kind of cool. And once you do open the hood, as I mentioned, your only powertrain option is now the gas 3.6-liter naturally aspirated V6. It makes 285 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque. That is now on the low end for the mid-size pickup truck segment because all of these turbocharged 4-cylinder powertrains, they produce a lot of torque, right? So you're in the 320s. The iForce Max powertrain on the Toyota Tacoma is in the 460s pound-feet of torque for that vehicle. That is very impressive. But I think people are going to be drawn to the Gladiator for its V6. You know, those 4-cylinders, yes, they're punchy, but they do sound like 4 cylinders and they do strain to move the car. Now, this engine is noticeably not that modern, both in the way it delivers power and its fuel economy. I averaged 16.3 mpg on the highway in a roughly 500-mile round-trip road trip. So yeah, it doesn't get good fuel economy. A large part of that is because this vehicle isn't that aerodynamic. I mean, just all of these bits that poke out of the car, they hurt this car's aerodynamic, and then it's just very upright as well. And this engine, again, is very old school. Now, the Wrangler obviously is available in the 4xe plug-in hybrid, which is a very interesting powertrain. I believe there's also 4-cylinder powertrains available for the Wrangler, but 3.6 V6 is your only option for Gladiator. Climbing into the back of the Jeep Gladiator, you know, getting into this car is a little strange. The floor is so high compared to the base of the seat. You know, your knees are just going to be kind of at a more extreme angle, but that means when you climb in, you really have to lift your foot up, even though you're not really sitting up that much higher than a traditional car. So I can just kind of slide in and then close this door. Again, it's the weird shaped opening, but sitting back here in the second row, yeah, this is very comparable to other mid-sized pickup trucks. I would actually say I have a little more legroom because the back of the front driver's seat has been hollowed out a bit. I have a little more legroom than I did in the new Tacoma and the new GMC Canyon, and I have plenty of headroom. I'm sitting pretty upright, but I could spend a couple hours back here, no problem. You have your window switches in the center of the car because the doors, obviously, they come off. You do have kind of like a bunch of panels around you. This is part of the roll cage and has your side curtain airbags, which are now standard for 2024. And you have like speakers and stuff and more of the roll cage in front of you. Obviously, this would be pretty cool if the roof was off. But yeah, I'm pretty comfortable back here. You don't have a center armrest that folds down, but that's all right. You have an outboard armrest, some mat pockets, rubber floor mats, which are good when this truck gets dirty. Yeah, pretty good back seat. Now, sitting in the front row, we get to appreciate the big update for Jeep Gladiator, which is this new 12.3-inch infotainment system, and it's actually great. I have zero complaints with it. It's pretty quick when you throw in your backup camera. It's a pretty high-quality backup camera. You also have a front-facing camera, no surround view, but you know, that's all right. It does pretty large Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which I really do like, and it's really close to you too, so it's actually super easy to control. I can almost just rest my elbow on the center console and interact with it as needed. You also continue to have physical controls lower down for stuff like your temperature and turning on your heated seats and heated steering wheel, which I love. I hate when everything goes into the screen. This is a really good balance. All your window switches are down low too. You have a manual transfer case, rear axle locker, some auxiliary buttons. The steering wheel is nice. You do have adaptive cruise control on this Gladiator Mojave. No lane centering technology. There is automatic emergency braking, but no lane centering technology or lane departure warning. This is the first vehicle I've driven in a while that hasn't had that technology, which is fine. It's just, it was honestly just a little surprising. And everything else is pretty nice. These are cloth seats, but they're fairly comfortable. They do have manually adjusting lumbar, which is nice. They're all manually adjustable. Leather-wrapped steering wheel, and the rest of this is a very utilitarian interior in terms of the design, but it's, if you've been in a Jeep, you're going to recognize it. There's a nice grab handle here for when things get pretty crazy off the road, or maybe even on the road. But yeah, very acceptable, and I really do like the new screen. All right, driving the Jeep Gladiator Mojave. Now, unfortunately, I have not been able to take this car off-roading this week. I'm filming this in Wisconsin, so there's not much deserts to be had anyways around here. But I have had ample amount of time to drive this car on road, which obviously isn't necessarily where this vehicle is home, but it is where it is going to be driven most of the time. No matter how off-road oriented any type of car is, it's still going to spend the majority of its time on the pavement. And driving this Jeep Gladiator, you know, I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. People often say, oh, the Jeep Wrangler, Gladiator, they're so hard to drive on the freeway, they're so loud, they're so uncomfortable. No, I mean, yeah, there's quite a bit of wind noise in here. I mean, you don't have that much separating you from the wind whipping by at 80 miles per hour, but it's not overwhelmingly loud. It doesn't like start ringing your ears. Same with the tire noise, even though these are big chunky tires, it's not that bad. Also, driving this car down the freeway, it doesn't have lane centering technology, as I mentioned, but it isn't that hard to keep the car straight. I've read that it likes to wander a lot. You definitely notice in the corners, this car cannot corner with a lot of speed. It really does start to lean, so you do need to take your corners cautiously in the Jeep Gladiator. I mean, this is a tall, pretty narrow vehicle, So that is something to make note of. But other than that, I mean, the seats are pretty comfortable. The suspension is pretty comfortable on this Mojave trim level, especially because it has these thick sidewall tires, which really does help make this car a little softer sprung. And yeah, good driving position. You sit very high up. The windshield is very upright too, so when it rains, you don't get that many raindrops like just falling right onto the windscreen. It's pretty interesting. Again, love the new infotainment system. Leather wrap steering wheel is comfortable. And okay, driving now at 40 miles per hour. Yeah, I noticed some wind noise, but like it isn't that bad. Now, the two things I do notice about this car's driving dynamics are the turning. You cannot turn very quickly with this car. Emergency maneuvers are a little more dicey with this vehicle. And the engine. This has an 8-speed automatic transmission. You can get a 6-speed manual, which is kind of crazy. That would be cool to experience. But this 8-speed manual, it does really long pulls with this 3.6 liter V6, because I think the V6, it really does need to spool up RPMs wise in order to give you a lot of power, because it doesn't have any turbocharged help there. So to give you the power to move this, you know, kind of big vehicle down the road, it really does need to bring the RPMs higher. It's a pretty old school experience, and it also doesn't lend itself, as nothing in this car lends itself to good fuel economy, because you are going to be spending a lot of time at higher RPMs, especially when you're accelerating, and then you have how not aerodynamic this vehicle is and how big these tires are. When I was cruising down the interstate getting 16.3 mpg, as I mentioned, the engine was hovering right around 2000 RPM. So it was working hard to move this big and this heavy of a vehicle at 80 miles per hour. So that's just another thing I noticed. I have yet to drive any of Jeep's other powertrains that you can get in the Wrangler, like the 4xe. I never drove the diesel, but I would be interested to. I'd be interested to see how that changes the character of this car, because I mean, this engine kind of matches the vibe of this car, just being old school, being a V6. But it would be interesting to see how this Gladiator would feel with a slightly different powertrain. But other than that, yeah, very comfortable. Leather wrapped steering wheel is nice. Love the new screen. I have my Apple CarPlay projected right now. It looks good. It's pretty comfortable in here. You can fit 4 full-size adults, like no issue. Like it's not going to be the most comfortable vehicle, but no issue there. When you have a tonneau cover on the bed, you have plenty of storage as well. And yeah, and you also know that you can take this car to a lot of places that other cars couldn't go, which is just really nice to have up in your head while you're driving down the road. Are you going to be doing that? Probably not a lot. If you are into off-roading, I mean, there are videos about how amazing this vehicle is, but do know on the road, it really isn't that bad. The worst thing is the fuel economy. Other than that, it's pretty comfortable. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.